This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. All right. I am here today with Kirk Neuroth and Sarah Blattberg. Um, in my 19 years of work, probably the two best interpreters that at least from what I know of working into English with a microphone, without sweating, playing it cool in front of a crowd. Um, and I remember attending a conference when I was a newer interpreter, and I remember Sarah, and I go, I want to do that. And so then now I do that, and I have students say, they watch me and say, I want to do that. And I'm like, let me tell you, I also did what you did, and now I'm doing it, so you can do it. So, would you mind introducing yourself, Kirk and Sarah, just a short bio of who you are, what you do? Sarah
Not at
first.
all. Oh, Sarah first. Great.
Okay. I was going to say, I also had that experience of hearing interpreters work for the first time and being like, I'm going to do that.
Yes. Yes.
My name is Sarah Blattberg. I have been interpreting for, oh, shoot, I always get this wrong. I guess it's like 30 years now. I live in Washington, D.C. And yeah, interpreting is really the only thing I'm qualified to do. So I really hope my voice and hands hang on for the next 20 or so years.
Yes. What else would we do with our time?
Mhm.
Kirk,
Truly.
who are you?
I am Kirk Neuroth.
Hey.
Hi, I live in Denver, Colorado. And interestingly, Sarah was actually the voice I heard from, I
Yes.
think, a Chicago RID conference, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
I could be wrong, but I think it was an RID conference. Nonetheless, I went, what she's doing, I want to do that, and I want to do it like that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I've been interpreting, oh boy, I should have done this math before we started. 22-ish years professionally, in a qualified manner for about 22 years, and work in all kinds of settings.
Yeah.
But really, in particular to this episode, I really enjoy opportunities to work with deaf professionals, deaf academics, deaf researchers, folks in that kind of milieu.
Agreed.
Yes. That was a good segue to, yeah, what we're here to talk about. You two were honestly the first that came to mind when I thought I want to talk about interpreters working into English. I can have that conversation with plenty of people, but then I thought, well, I want to do it where we work into English with in high stakes situations at conferences with a microphone in our hand, with professional deaf people who are giving presentations. That's another tier higher of stress and prep and mental focus and ensuring you're wearing black so no one can see how much you're sweating, like that. And you were the first two that came to mind, so I appreciate you all coming on and talking. Uh, we've got so many things we could cover. I don't even know where to start. Um, so context, we're working a conference or working somewhere where there's a deaf professional giving a presentation and we're the assigned interpreters. I suppose, where do we begin? You've been assigned this job. Where do you all even start? Don't be
Well,
shy. You just
I'll
gotta
just
go.
say, I will say, as even as a preface for that, I feel like interpreters have this huge fear of what when I was coming up we
Yes,
called voicing, and now I know it's like not cool to say that. You're just
I
like
know.
interpreting English or whatever.
I'll
I'm old
probably
school,
say
so I'm like
voicing
it's
at some
voicing.
point.
Um, but the reason is that we can hear ourselves, so
Thank
we
you.
hear the mistakes we're making, or we hear the false starts, or we hear the ums and the uhs, whatever. There's a false belief that we're better at signing because we don't have the the ability as well to do that kind of monitoring. And so in a way, that the high stakes feeling around voicing is actually, in my like, disrespectful to ASL and deaf people, because it
Yes.
presumes that English is more important. It is more important in the sense of the world is majority hearing, and so therefore there's, whatever. But the idea that interpreters are like, oh, I'd rather just sign, I don't want a voice. It's like, you know what, honey, you're not that great at signing.
And you think you
So
are, but you can't see yourself, and
That's
no
it. You
one's
can't.
told you.
and the
So,
truth is, 100% of us, unless we are native users of the language, are actually better at working into English. That's your
yes.
native language. You're actually going to do a better job if you can just breathe. Like I say to people, if you understand what that person is saying, and that's the issue, if
Yes.
you understand what that person is saying, you're going to be able to say it. You can tell me the plot of the movie you saw last night. You can tell me the story of your favorite book. If you get a minute to be like, okay, he's talking about when he went to the restaurant and I know how to say that in English. I know what to do with that. So sometimes I feel like, I mean, I appreciate the accolades, of course, but sometimes I feel like it's kind of a false thing. Like I'm a huge reader. I'm a very well-educated person, overeducated in that way, liberal New York, all of that stuff. So yeah, I can speak English.
Kirk,
And
you've
yeah,
said this. Yeah, Kirk, you've said this too, and we've had this conversation and we've said it to students.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up before we even dove in. And I'm
Yeah.
sure Kirk has to add, but we
No,
think
it's the
we're
same
better into
thing.
English
That's right.
or
It's the
into
same point.
sign.
Yeah. And somebody early in my career said that to me. When the common sort of narrative is, oh, I'm better at working into sign than into English, when in fact it's just that you don't know. You don't know what you're putting out in
Yes.
ASL, so you can't monitor it because if you don't have a native fluency in it, you think that you're doing really well, but you don't know what's missing. Versus when your product is your native language, you know what's missing and you know what's wonky and you know what you're stumbling over. So yeah, that's a common misconception.
And the other piece of that, actually, if I can just add, is that the hearing audience has generally, like, unless they're very international and they're used to sort of broken English, talking to people who are in different levels of fluency, they have much less flexibility in
Yes.
hearing mistakes and sort of figuring it out. Deaf people, exposed to a variety of signing styles within their own community and within the interpreting community, and they're like, they'll
Yeah,
figure it out. So
that's right.
Yes.
sometimes, you think you're doing a good job, and it's like the deaf person's just like, I'm getting it, I'm getting it, I'm getting it, I'm working, and you don't know how much work is going into it.
Yeah.
You leave the job thinking like I did really well, and it's like the deaf person really did really well.
Yeah, they worked really
Yes.
hard at understanding me.
Well, and I've
Yeah.
also thought you are scared to take this mic and talk because there's 40 hearing people who will judge you versus this one deaf person who is like essentially like stuck
Right.
figuring it out and they aren't getting the source message, so they don't really sometimes often know the mistakes we're making because they're not hearing the source message. So, yes, I've
The
had this
opposite is
conversation.
also true, by the way. Sorry, I just interrupted.
Yeah, please.
The opposite is also true for working into English, that there are interpreters, myself included, who can do a bang up job of making it sound good. And it
Yes.
may or may not be what the source message is, but everybody, oh, that was so beautiful, and whatever. I mean, and I joke about that sometimes. Like I'll tell people, I don't always say what people are signing. Like I say what they should be saying. I say what the hearing
Yes.
audience is expecting to hear. I say the
That's the
vocabulary.
a
Yeah.
cultural mediation piece for sure.
Or
Well, and
me
Andrea,
deciding.
yeah, you and I have talked about this, like me making a decision to move up a register because I
Mhm.
think it's what the audience wants or expects when it may or may not be the register that I'm getting, right?
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've interpreted for into English for a deaf comedian, and he's like, I think most hearing people are here. He's like, I don't give a shit what I sign, make it funny to hearing people. And I'm like,
Yes.
good thing I can okay. He um but yes,
Yes.
all great points that need to be remembered for caution into thinking you're good at just the signing, but also encouragement that, hey, I think you can do this English part too.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
do
I would
think,
definitely go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
This is going to be really hard to
I know for
interpret
an hour.
afterwards. I was going to say, I do think that there are things that people can do to mitigate their own anxiety and their own like chances
Yes.
of a big mishap, which is like, I would never personally, I would not accept a conference job without knowing the deaf person. Like, I don't
Oh,
understand somebody who's like, oh, okay, I'm voicing tomorrow. Oh, who's the person? What's the topic? Okay, give me the mic. Like, why would you
because
do
we can say no. Like I
Yeah,
think people forget you can say no.
yeah,
And
that's what I
I
was,
think that's what makes Kirk good is he's always like, am I prepped? No, no, thank you.
yep, not for me. I think especially in this space, because we're talking about deaf professionals, deaf academics, with a lot on the line, a lot at stake,
Yes.
careers are sometimes, moved into a different trajectory because of one presentation. And given that fact, I think sometimes nothing is better than something.
Mhm.
Right? So I'm
Yes.
very cautious about what seat I sit in and what microphone I pick up, only because I know that representing this person equitably, effectively, has a lot of stakes. And so to answer like your first question, like you've taken the job, I'm like, let's back way up. Why have I
Yes.
taken that job? Why do I think I'm the person to do it? Do I even so, and if I don't know the person, do I then
What
have
do
a
you
list
do?
of this is what I need
Yep.
to even consider sitting in the chair for
Yeah.
this instance, right? Like the
Yeah.
opportunity to meet with them virtually in advance, or I wrote at one point like cyber stalking. Like
Yes.
lately, when I haven't had the opportunity to work only with folks whose work I'm familiar with, there's a lot of opportunity to see people's work and presentation online, and that's maybe like the next best
Yeah.
option, but it's an option.
And I think also just to build on that idea of the cyber stalking, there's the idea that there's the term access labor, right? Which is like the work that anybody with a disability has to do to engage with a place, make sure that it's going to be accessible to them. And so like sometimes I don't want to ask a deaf person to, hey, can we do another half hour, da, da,
Yeah.
da,
Yeah.
da. Like I remember taking years ago a workshop on like prep and how to prep, and people were like, well, what do you do when they don't give you anything? Like the agency didn't give me anything, I didn't, da, da, da. And the person who was presenting that workshop was kind of like, here's the thing, of course the agency, because they're taking a cut of your money, they should be doing their jobs and be getting you what you need, but the truth is we have a lot of agency to do what we need for ourselves. So it's like, and this was years ago, so now the resources are even multiplied in the sense of what you can find online about people. And so sometimes I'm cautious about asking for more from that person. And I've actually had deaf people be like, I kind of don't care. Like, my audience is maybe the audience is like predominantly deaf, and it's just some hearing people. And like, I kind of don't care about them, and I really don't want to take extra time. And I've had even that them directly say, like, are you asking all the hearing presenters to sit down with you? And if not, you
Yeah.
know,
Right,
and it's like,
right.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think too, just while we're sort of zoomed out about why do this work and who should do this work and in what context, right? I think the other piece that I have started to recognize is we, particularly second language learners of ASL, that is the primary focus, acquiring that language, getting adept in that language. And clearly that's an important component of this work. But I think our other responsibility to be really solid, polished users of English sort of gets short, what's that
Shrift,
phrase? Speaking
thrift,
of
short
English,
shrift.
short thrift.
Yes.
So I mean, I do intentionally like listen to how hearing people talk in professional settings when I'm not interpreting, right? I'm attending a meeting or watching a TED Talk or seeing an academic present about something I'm interested in. And when they use a phrase, I am tucking it away and sometimes even making notes of, oh, that would work well when this ASL idiom comes up, or as a transition, or as a way of explaining statistics, right? So like attending to how professionals in professional context use English, I think is a piece that we don't often attend to, right? Because it is true that you can explain the movie once you've seen it, but the level at which you can explain the movie
Yes.
does vary based on your proficiency with the language. And proficiency in both languages is what we say we do,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Totally.
So I take
Very.
that responsibility really seriously as well.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
huge piece is the English. And I'd say I learned that through interpreting a lot of research classes and interpreting. And Andrea naturally is not an academic. I swear I say silly things. I am a dirty mind. Like I just don't gravitate towards that formal speech. I can turn it on. It does literally feel like I'm like turning a switch on to fit what's around me. And it's true. I have to listen. And I get real proud of those moments when I've taken the language that I've heard around me that Andrea would never say. Like that's the key when I'm like, is this what I do not sound like? Perfect. I'm doing my job right. Um, yeah, what else in terms of prep or being ready for this space? Um,
It's
there's a
interesting because
lot.
I worked with an interpreter who is amazing, who is a native user and is an amazing English user as well. And we did a job together years ago, but we're good friends. And so she has reminded me of this, that we were walking into a job, and I don't even remember any of the details about the job, but I was asking for certain types of prep materials that she just wasn't asking for. And she was kind of like, you're a good interpreter. Why are you asking for this prep? Like not quite like that, but just like, huh. And I apparently said the phrase, which I do not remember saying, but like, I prep as much as I need to for each assignment. That may be that there are some assignments I don't prep for at all. Like
Yes.
I just walk in and I just go, it's fine, whatever. And there are other assignments where I'm like, I actually need to read the 600 pages of this dissertation before I do your defense. Not usually, but so, prepping, I think, looks like different things, not only for different people, but for different assignments within the same person.
For sure. Yeah. And how I prep mentally is entirely different depending on which
Yes.
language I'm working into,
Yeah.
Oh,
right? Like when I
100%.
get material, how I'm thinking about what the product, what the implications for the product is an entirely different process.
Yeah.
I've worked with people who choose to do both, and I'm always very clear, like, okay, which language are you going to be using? Spoken like English or ASL, and how I'm thinking about what we're going to do there is totally different. And I think um, teaming for me, the team in this setting, um, I have a different checklist
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
of who I want in the seat next to
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
I want someone totally tuned in. I want someone whose ego is at the door and who is mutually willing to step in, take over, offer what's needed, wait for my process, but also
Mm-hmm.
be there if it's not about my process and just about I'm lost. Like who I'm looking for in this setting is really different also.
I think that's it's a really great point, and it's also really hard to tease out. I remember two colleagues who worked together for many, many, many years, and they were just always teamed together, and then one of them moved to a different state. And the other one, we were talking about like, wow, this is, like, I always see you guys together. What's that going to be like? And she said, I feel like I'm losing my right arm, you know, in a voicing way, because it's like she knows what I need even almost before the second that and
Yes.
I think deaf folks, and certainly hearing, audience members, whatever, they don't, or hiring entities, they don't really get the importance of the teaming dynamic. Like I'm a nice person and I can sort of, jive with anyone, certainly for a 2 hour class, like whatever, I'll make it work.
Mhm.
But having a different person that I'm working with all the time, there's a lot of extra, mental work that goes into it. And I don't necessarily want that where this is the only person I can ever work with, but I see the appeal for sure.
For sure. I
Absolutely.
think too, since we're talking about teaming in this context, and I'm mindful of what you were talking about, Sarah, of putting the burden on the deaf person who's presenting to have to do this extra step. But I also do really think of the deaf professional as a part of the team. I mean, I want to be having conversations about if, things as trivial as acronyms, but also things like cultural nuances. Do you want to unpack how much, like, I want to empower you
Yeah.
to do what you intend. You may choose not to unpack an acronym for a reason because you're going to later, ask people what if they know it, that kind of thing. So I'm very mindful of keeping the power dynamic where it needs to be and asking explicitly for also like getting what we as a team need from you in really efficient ways. Like if I just need time versus if we need to clarify and what we need to clarify. So like those conversations are
Yeah.
important.
What, because teaming will come up throughout this whole conversation in all of these aspects. But when you're going in to calm nerves, to be ready mentally, there's random things I do. The throat chakra. I will open mine right up and typically sitting in the bathroom before I go work. Like it's a lot of, and like power stance, um, reminding myself I know how to speak, like just like bringing myself into the moment. Um, what do you all do to stay calm when you're handed a mic?
How woo-woo can we get?
Oh, I just said throat chakra. So what else do you want to throw out?
I mean, depending on the context, if it's someone I know and whose work I know and who I work with
Right.
all the time, this is less the case. But
Yes.
if it's high stakes and a new person to me and maybe a new team and gobs of hearing people who know sign and all of that anxiety is on the table for me, I have some practices. I mean, I do some visualization prior to. I mean, I take my inner critic is about 6 years old. And
Okay.
I literally do some visualization where I take him to spend some time with my grandma, who's no longer
Nice.
on the earth, and she rocks with him and tends to him so that he's busy. He's busy
Mhm.
with her, he's taken care of. And, then I also do a kind of, I call it a grounding chord. I
Yep.
mean, it's a coping strategy, really, in which I like have a chord, energetic chord that, oh, I can't wait to interpret this,
There
that I
you go.
send down into the earth. And when just that anxiety stuff comes up, I have a place to flush it. Right?
Mm.
I take a deep breath and I flush it down through that cord because it's inevitable. I mean, we're not always a kind profession to each other, and I'm aware of that as
Yep.
I'm the fella with the mic, especially when there's interpreters in the crowd. And I don't want that interfering with what this speaker
Yes.
intends to accomplish. And
Mm.
so those are some practices. And then Sarah actually taught me, and I have been since, using a fidget. And if I don't have one, I make sure, yeah,
I've got
I'm
one in my
wearing
hand right now.
something that I can fidget with, like
Mhm. Mhm.
surreptitiously without anyone noticing. And
Mhm.
it is really helpful.
Nice.
Yeah. It's funny because here it is. I'm really not that woo-woo. And so even if I tried to do some of those practices, I would think I was being ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like I would be able to tap into the power of them. I mean, I do think I'd probably try to breathe a couple times before I do it. And, if I get kind of like deer in the headlights while I'm going, I stop and just um yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, when was the last time I took something that felt, I mean, I've certainly taken jobs that I felt like nervous about, but I think I just feel like it just got to get done.
I'm
You just
here.
got
I
to do
gotta
it.
do it.
Yeah,
That's true.
And not like,
I,
oh, there's no one else, because there are other people, but
yeah.
yeah.
If
I
we
often
zoom into, oh, sorry.
no go on.
If we zoom into actually the work is happening, I also often return to some advice. Can we mention particular interpreters? Is that okay?
I think so. Yeah, if
Great,
it's good
great.
stuff, yeah.
Stacy
Please.
Storm once gave me the
Yes.
advice once to breathe, just continue to breathe, be communicated with, right? Like I mean, to varying degree, I know ASL. Be
Yes.
communicated with,
Uh,
as if
Yes.
you're in the audience.
uh-huh.
Be
Just
communicated
an
with.
easy chit chat.
Yep.
Nice.
And then don't open your mouth until you have something to say.
Nice.
Oh,
And sometimes that
imagine.
doesn't always work the way I hope. Sometimes
Sure.
I think I have a perfect thing to say and it's not at all what I needed to say. But when
Yeah.
in doubt, stop.
Yeah.
Don't
That's
start.
I would say
excellent
that's
advice. And so hard for me because I basically allow no processing time whatsoever.
same.
And I have told teams when I'm working, I'm like, if I'm like, da, 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 if I stop, I miss something because
Yep.
I don't stop. I just keep talking. And sometimes I keep talking. I talk through the block. Like, I don't know
Yep.
what I
Uh-huh.
just,
Yep.
I'm going to just keep
I've
talking.
done that. Yep.
We're going to get
I've
back on the
done it too.
same track
Yep. Yeah, we're
at some
gonna get
point.
there at some point. Yep.
And I say to add to that, with the teaming part, I like to we obviously tell our teams, okay, these are my areas of weakness. If they're going to do this, please hop in. I don't need you that close, but I need you close, like depending who you are, depending the situation, expressing to my team exactly what I'm nervous about. I find it helpful just because we're both there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're,
I also think that we are kind of terrible self monitors about what it is, like, you know, like, oh, if I need you, I'm gonna reach over and tap you, and
And
then
we
like what
don't do
happens in
it.
the moment is like your head goes this way and your hand doesn't go, you know, whatever it is, like whatever you think your sign is, it's probably not.
Yeah,
So
that's
going
funny.
back
That's
to
true.
helpful to work with, you know, the same person or a group of people so that they're like, yeah, you know what your actual tell is, you know, whatever. Something else.
It
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
So we're in the job. The job is happening. Um, there's a lot of stuff we can touch on with this too. Uh, the one thing that just comes to mind in terms of strategies, or the one thing that I just find the most difficult, especially in these settings, is if a deaf person is up there reading from a paper and we are holding the paper as we're watching them, and your eyeballs learn to do two things at once, and you need a whole team of people around you to hold the paper, to follow with a pencil. Like, I don't think people understand the dynamics that happen in that type of setup.
But I love that. I mean,
I love hate.
I'm a
Whew.
native English user, right? So if I don't have to go through
Read.
ASL, how amazing is that? I've got the English in front of me, and
Yeah.
I'll have my team and just say, just tell me if I'm going, you know, too fast, too slow. And
Mhm.
I look up and I check, but I'm a big, but here's the thing. It's also like a place of privilege. I am a quick reader, and
Yep.
I have the facility to look at a PowerPoint, take it all in, and then read from the PowerPoint while they're presenting. I've worked with interpreters, and I thought everybody did
I do
that,
not.
right? And
Nope.
so I've worked with interpreters who are like, literally, I have dyslexia. I can't use a PowerPoint at all. Like, it
Ah.
will not help. You know, if there's a picture, maybe I can, but, and so I'm always like, she's just reading the slide. And it's like, fuck you, it doesn't help.
Right. Read it to me.
Oh, interesting. I'm the same. I feel like I have the capacity to have one eyeball on each. I don't know if
Yes.
that's really happening, but that's what it
Right.
feels like to me.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
happening.
Yes. And I think some of it comes with age, you know, experience, whatever. Like, I remember being a younger interpreter, newer interpreter, and feeling like I can't take my eyes off this deaf person for even a millisecond. Like, if I sneeze, because you can't keep your eyes open when you sneeze, if I sneeze, I'm going to miss something important. And now I'm much more like, okay, let's see where we're going. And, you know, okay, I got it. You know, like, I will break eye contact
Yeah.
to make use of other resources. And for me, English is a huge resource.
Yeah. I will say, we're talking about during the job. One of the things I've been recognizing lately is one of the reasons why, and I think this, I mean, it's good practice generally speaking. If you know the person, if you know their content, you know their work, it's you can provide a more accurate message. But
Yes.
also, like, I don't know who originally said, like, people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you make them feel. And the capacity to then work with like affect and humor and
Imagine.
tone and timing and like, yeah, just adding those nuances is so much fun, right?
Yes.
When you're not worried about, am I just getting each point on the PowerPoint slide, but I
Yes.
already know what you're going to say because
Yeah.
I've done
Oh,
it with you 10
Yes.
times. But
Yes.
then you can work with like the tone and the personality. Like I love when the best feedback I ever get is like, I feel like you weren't even here, you know, to me. I feel
hmm
like Amy was talking or Cliff was talking. Like,
Mm,
I just feel like they were talking. And that is always good feedback to me, more than like, oh, I learned the 10 steps of blah, blah, blah. But they
right.
got to like experience this person's personality and sense
Yeah.
of humor and that kind of thing too. Is a great compliment to me
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
s-
and to
I'd
them
say
ultimately. But yeah,
that's my favorite too, is when I'm like, okay, we've done this presentation before. I know where we're going. I can add all of that extra fun, and I can say the words that in a better way than just me surviving to get through the words. Um, yeah.
yeah.
What
Can I
what are
say one thing though?
coping? Yes, please.
I do think sometimes though we take it too far. Like, those of us who have like a real love of English, sometimes like, you know, I've had deaf folks read the captioning, you know, along, like, they're doing blah, 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 and they kind of look over, and in a sort of complimentary way, but also like, wow, you made me sound like really smart. That's, you know, or, you know, you gave me a
Mhm.
PhD. And it's like, and I used to joke that everybody gets a PhD out of my mouth. And the thing is, that's more about me sounding good than about really representing them. So
Right.
I do think there's a line there.
Yep.
I
And that
do.
comes into a teaming dynamic also.
Your team should
Because
tell you.
yeah, if we're both anchoring in a different
Yes,
register, that can be really
Yes,
jarring to a
that's
hearing
true.
audience who doesn't really even recognize what's happening down there.
Yeah.
You
Well, and I've
know,
right.
worked with
like it
interpreters
sounds
who
like
were,
the person changed all of a sudden. Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
And I've worked with interpreters who were like so wanting it to sound a certain way that they ended up like losing the message for looking for that, looking for that SAT word. And I was like, you don't, this is not that. We're not in such an academic, like you can just be regular. This is a
Yeah.
regular guy getting up talking about his regular beliefs. Like,
Yeah. Go with the $5 word. We know there's a $500 word,
yes,
but
yes,
$5 word works perfectly. Yeah.
yes,
I did write that down. Register of often people think in those settings we must pick the highest register and have to speak it a certain way. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, but what you just said made no sense. Like I don't even what words you said words, but you didn't say anything.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to listen to how hearing people talk in
mm-hmm.
those settings too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the deaf person ends up out of my mouth
Yeah,
sounding like a little bit intimidating
yeah,
when they aren't, when their delivery isn't. If we listen to how other hearing people are talking in that context, it's often like
yeah,
pretty relaxed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's
So
also a piece about that that's like being really aware of your own cultural background. So, like, I'm just thinking about, working in DC, working in a lot of government settings. DC is a predominantly African American city. And so um, there will be a lot of folks of color in a lot of government settings, especially, and this is, of course, historical racism and stuff like in lower level positions. I mean, all positions, but so sometimes it'll be like, right, we're this is a group of janitors really, having a briefing or whatever. They're not sounding like they're, and so I have to be really cognizant of like walking in there with my white, PhD face and being like, okay, this is not how people are talking, but I'm not that. So I
so I
can't fake,
can't.
yeah, you can't pretend that that's what I am. So it's interesting. It's like a really like mental gymnastics. How do I represent this group, this person so that they fit in with this group without looking like I'm mimicking something that I know
Yes.
it's not my intent.
And also just being aware of our own stuff. Like I have a really hard time with conflict, like direct conflict. And so I catch myself, I'm like, don't soften their tone. Don't substitute words when they actually are really pissed. Like that's just in general voicing, but I notice myself. I'm aware of it.
And I
Of
would say sometimes I might make a choice that I actually would soften it because I'm thinking big picture, what is the goal?
I know.
Like, I know what you want to get out of this interaction, and I think I know a better way to get it.
I
you
know.
know?
Yeah.
I had very early in my career, I had a deaf person that I worked with fairly regularly say, we're going to make this phone call. And I was like, okay. And they said, I'm going to swear at them. Like, you need to be okay with that because I'm really mad. And I want you to say, I'm fucking pissed. Like, practice it right now in the
Right.
office and let's make the phone call. But they were clear that that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking about this during the job, different things that come up and the things
Yeah.
that tend to trip me up.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and this seems very sort of trivial, but one of the things that I find often tripping me up are these cultural brokering moments where like a reference to, name a deaf culture thing. And that's usually well, it is the direction I'm working in, right? I'm working in the English, especially in an audience that is totally uninitiated to deaf cultural things, right? Like deaf schools or relay or things that like come out in one sign in ASL, but might need just roughly 15 minutes
Right.
to get this audience to
Yes.
get it to accomplish their goal. So
Yeah.
coming
Mm.
up with in advance, right? Like effective and efficient, quick phrases that are going to encapsulate enough and not
Yes.
hold up the show, right?
Scripts.
Right,
Having a script.
scripts almost like literally like memorized scripts, canned phrases that will sort of explain relay in
Yeah.
8.3 seconds
Yeah. Nice.
or
Nice.
something like relay, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I think of that. It makes me think about like when a deaf presenter or someone makes a joke and it's not funny, or they do or say certain things, and I'm like, should I say, okay, I'm going to say it. Often it's a dance of where do I let this ship sink and where do I culturally and just make it move through like, and that's just everywhere. But
Yeah.
that's a
That's
dance I have in my head
Yeah.
that's a tricky
often.
one. And not even
Yes.
just about humor. I had an assignment recently and I won't say anything about it other than it didn't go well.
Hmm.
The the person presenting just froze and didn't know left from right and no longer knew what was up or down and the whole thing just went awry. And I had this giant temptation to
To
fix it,
save it. Yes.
to save it, right?
Yeah.
To just hit a home run with what was happening. And it was took everything in me to just let the train go off the tracks. Yeah, that's the harder thing
Yeah.
Yes.
than the opposite end of the continuum. Yeah, for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
What do you do in those moments of I'm lost? I missed that finger spelling. I need a clarification. My team didn't give it to me. Or I just am thinking of moments of panic where I'm totally lost. I guess just what are coping mechanisms? I guess it's very specific though, because it's each situation and um
I was gonna
or
say
yeah,
for me it depends on the
right.
context of so I have worked more recently, I've worked with people who are like, guess what? Interpreting is not magic.
Oh, isn't that so
It's
nice when
Yeah,
it's acknowledged? Oh,
yeah. Because the one thing I remind myself in those moments is I watch deaf people have to clarify with each other all day long. What? What
yes.
was that?
Mhm.
I just remember that in
Yes.
that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that
And so
happens all the
there
time.
I would say there's even like a school of thought that says make it not make it ugly, but like make the work visible
Yeah.
for the whole hearing
Yes.
audience. We're gonna hold on, we're gonna clarify, like really make it visible to make something up and keep going, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that whole spectrum of
Yeah.
how you can solve it. And I think, like you said, Kirk, if the deaf person is a team with you and you've had a chance to have those like briefing conversations and you say, how should we handle this? If they say, keep going, I don't want anything to derail the train, figure it out, do some pretty English and get back on the train when you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do
I
that.
will say, yeah, in this context, because we're talking about high stakes, professional level, academic level, I am very careful to, I'm judicious about when I am explicit, but
Yes.
I am careful to say things like, and the interpreter may have mispronounced that, or right, like, and perhaps the interpreter, I'm careful to acknowledge when the lack of comprehension or pronunciation or whatever it may be is me and not them. Because
Yeah.
I recognize that like they're in their field, talking to their field, and I'm not. So making those kinds of things explicit in this context, I try to do.
And it's funny because I could see doing it in some cases, but I
Mhm,
think it sometimes calls attention. I'm from an older school, right? Where you like
mhm.
try to be invisible, try to be invisible,
Yeah,
where it's almost like you didn't have to say that because you just corrected it, right? Like
mhm.
da 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 da, and oh, interpreter clarification. Sorry, pardon the interpreter. Da, da, da. And I'm like, stop calling attention to yourself. Just do the
Yeah,
work. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yep.
Get
Like
back
I
in.
said, I'm judicious. I don't always do it, but sometimes it's about just that example, like
For sure.
pronunciation.
For
If
sure.
it's a author in the field that everybody knows and I'm just getting the silent finger spelling and I'm making a guess, I'll add something like, if the interpreter's pronouncing this correctly, blah, 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 blah. And I
Yeah.
don't think anybody notices,
Yeah.
but just explicitly recognizing they'd pronounce it correctly if they did that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I remember the first time I was introduced to, and I actually don't know how to spell the name anymore. But it's like a Czech author. The last name is pronounced Csikszentmihalyi, Any ideas? Anyway, it's spelled some completely different way, right? Like it's like CZ and then it's MIHALY at the end, whatever, something totally different. And the deaf person said, because they had not always been deaf, and they said it's pronounced, and they were like chicks in me high, like
Love
they
it.
gave that to me, and I never
Yes.
forgot that, like chicks in me high, got it.
Yeah.
I'm probably putting the pronunciation, I mean the stress in the wrong place, but like you would never be able to get that off someone's finger spelling because it's, I mean, somebody there would, but we wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe not the keynote speaker, but like in general conferences or things like that, I do like drawing attention or just making it clear that this is an interpreted process. This process right now is being interpreted, and we're trying our best. If we can make it flawless and you didn't even notice and everything's grand, but I think it's okay for us to be like, wait, what? Hold on. And we're just going to clarify for a second. You mean, okay. And then like, I just don't know that that's taboo and terrible anymore. Like I said, not keynote, but like,
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate to identify that we are not AI at this point. Um, not yet.
For better or worse, I guess.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say on here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm also thinking of just logistics. I have a love-hate with microphones. I have a love-hate with making me yell.
Mm.
A love-hate with bad angles. But see the deaf person, but also stand this way so they can all hear you. Like, there's so many layers that go into making this just a comfortable, smooth experience that you have to have been at a conference and done these things to go, oh, shit, to have even thought of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of logistics, if you have anything.
I just did a conference where the microphones were, like on the table, like this kind of a mic in front of you. And many of the interpreters kind of just like, and so now we are going to be,
Oh,
they got real quiet because it was like I'm in a mic and it's intimate, and most of the audience was deaf and didn't, like, and it was being captioned, so it's like it doesn't need to be heard, it just needs to be read. And and the sound people were pulling their hair out. Like we kept getting messages, the American team kept getting messages like, please speak up.
Mhm.
Like pretend there's no microphone and actually talk. Because
yes.
everybody saw the microphone and went in for the intimate
Mhm.
podcast experience.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. I won't yell. I'm not a yeller. That's not. And so, and I'm not afraid of a microphone. So I'm always just like, bring me a mic.
Mhm.
Even if nobody else is using a mic, bring me a mic because I'm sitting in the front of the room, which means my voice is going this direction, which
Yes.
people back there can't hear me. And here's a teaming thing, an I thing. I like to be a little further back. Most teams, I mean, I came up in the field where we sit in the very first row like this, and you get a crick in your neck. And then I was like, well, could we sit in the second row? Could we sit in the third row? Could I stand in
Same.
the back of the room?
Back. That if it's a
Especially now because
classroom
I can't
feel,
see anything without my glasses. I'm like,
Yep.
let me get in the back of the room. I will actually understand your finger spelling much better. But you can't do that when your team is like, no, I want to sit right here. So there's that discussion too of
yep.
logistics. Where are we sitting that is comfortable for both of our eyes and our necks and frankly your voice? Like if you're like this, that's stress on your vocal cords. So
A
Yeah.
lot of logistics.
A lot.
not to think about.
If it's a
Mhm.
small enough space and I can stand in the back and my voice is floating over these people, oh, I would rather.
Much better.
Same.
Yeah,
Much better.
much better. Yeah.
Anything else about during the job?
I mean, I have horror stories, but I don't think we're talking
I
about
know
that.
we've got stories. I'm trying to think of what would happen in the stories. Oh,
Right?
the goal of the presenter. I think you kind of
Uh-huh.
touched on that too. We don't want to give away answers before they ask them the question. We don't.
Mm.
Who's the audience? Do these people know what you're talking about? Do they not? Like
Mhm.
all of that has to be gleaned from the conference. You have to know the conference itself, who's there. Yeah, just the goal of everyone there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think recognizing sometimes, how do I say this? I shouldn't have opened my mouth until I had something to say. But
Started.
it's something like, I think sometimes realizing how little a unexposed audience understands about deaf world and deaf culture lends
Mhm.
itself to this work as well. Like we might think that it's perfectly clear when we make some reference to,
Mhm.
I name a deaf cultural reference, right?
Yeah.
But recognizing that that is falling on
Deaf ears,
deaf
right?
ears.
Hearing
And
ears that don't
all
know.
of the stuff that comes after that then is missing that the context or the parallel or the analogy or right, whatever point was being made by that
Yes.
deaf cultural reference. If I
Yes.
don't take a little time to do some brokering, depending on the audience,
Yep.
then it could have a impact on what comes thereafter, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Well,
think
and
what else trips me up in during.
so I just did a thing, and there's no way I can keep this confidential because it's literally like somebody's name sign, and that's why it got all messed up. So this person had passed away, and they were having like a celebration of life, and people were getting up and telling stories, mixed
Ooh.
hearing and deaf people.
Yeah.
So I had signed up to volunteer interpret whatever they needed, close vision, tactile, whatever was needed. So I had no prep whatsoever because I wasn't, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I walked in and somebody went, "Can you voice?" And I went, "Yep." Sat down and took the mic. Literally, that's like no prep whatsoever. So somebody gets up and they're talking about this individual whom I did not know, the one who had passed away.
Yeah.
Didn't know their name sign, didn't know the story of their name sign. So they start talking about the story of the name sign. I had made a completely different assumption based on previous people's getting up, like, I know why that name sign was. And I went off in that direction as we were, and then it comes out and it's totally not the reason for the name sign. And I had to course correct while I was there, and not course correct in like, oh, the interpreter messed that up entirely, but I was like, but in fact that wasn't the reason. The reason was
JK.
made it part
Yeah.
of the story. And later, and there were a ton of interpreters in the room, and so and later I was talking to one of them, and I was just like, I had no idea about the name sign thing. And they were like, but it actually, it worked. Like, it didn't sound like the interpreter messed up, it didn't sound like the person messed up. It sounded like that would be a natural assumption when you saw that sign, and in fact it wasn't, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
The course correct. The
Yeah.
rather. The little words you can throw in for the negation at the end.
Yeah, but that,
In
I was gonna say,
fact, it
that
was
clause
not.
final negation is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
hell on us.
Yeah. I will say too, I'm thinking about these contexts. So not every interpreting context, but professional, high stakes, researcher, yada yada. I have found myself, and this might sort of lead to after the job too, because it kind
Yes.
of has feet in both. I have started to pay attention to if I make a word choice and I even have a moment of like, was that the right word choice? Would there were some others that I could have used? And if I have that like huh moment, I will approach
Mm.
said speaker and say, this is the word that I use. You should know that
Yeah.
in your professional context, this is the word that got used. Or right, especially sometimes about the really delicate stuff. I remember one was about language deprivation, and I used some pretty powerful terms that I think fit. But afterwards, I said these were the actual words, and they weren't attending to me at all, which I appreciated. But this is what you said in this context now because it came out of my mouth. And that I think is also an element of just power, sharing that
Yes.
power and
Yeah.
privilege, right? Like you said these words now.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
if you want to somehow course correct that in
Yeah.
your own context, you have the opportunity to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And sometimes it's not knowing that political stuff. Like
Oh.
yeah, definitely. I have been in situations where I would use like kind of strong, like language deprivation,
Mhm.
kind of language. And thankfully, the deaf person prior said, I need these people to be my friends. I need to present it in a certain way.
Yeah.
Don't say deprivation. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna think that
Yeah.
because this is what we're talking about, but don't actually say that word. Like, they
Yeah.
really said, no matter what I sign, I might sign that in that moment. Don't say it. Just say whatever.
Wonderful.
And they
Yeah.
gave me language they wanted me to use, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hearing levels versus hearing loss. Certain situations, certain words, people first language, someone who has autism or autistic, like Andrea doesn't know the right answer. I don't know. I don't want to mess it up. Right. I do get very nervous in those moments, and it is mostly me listening to what others are saying and kind of copying that. Yeah, those moments where it's very sensitive words, and in these situations, those it is often those because they're talking about those topics. Uh, yes, I may directly ask, which words do you want? And I like the talk to them afterwards of this is what words were said. So the job is finished.
I was going to say one other thing. Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. We're in the job still.
I
JK,
think
keep
the
going.
other thing, it keeps coming up for me in these contexts, and I think it's important. It's an important element of this. If in this context, the deaf presenter is giving me the words, if they are choosing to code switch to the point where I have every word to say, I feel the responsibility to do that. Like
Yeah,
if they are bilingual enough and making the choice to code switch to that extreme, where I have
Mhm.
no doubt I think it behooves me and them and all of us to say, this is yours. I don't have to do all this
there is no
creative stuff.
interpreting.
Right.
Right.
I just say what I see,
Yeah.
but I've
Yeah.
had some interesting issues with teams about that, right? I'm like,
Interesting.
it's really super clear. Like it's everywhere. It's everywhere in, choosing to come up with a different term. I
Yeah.
think it just because in this context, so many
Yes,
professionals do have the language capacity to go across the continuum. And when they do, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's be
Like
in tandem.
if they did the whole speech that way, that would be great. You got those people who are
yes,
like, "La," and
Yeah,
then
right.
I'm like,
True.
oh, I need a minute.
yes. Well, and
Very true.
I tell that to students often. I'm like, they're giving you every word, and I say, just add noise. All you're
Mm.
doing is adding noise. It's there. It's spoon fed, and you just say the words.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I often find that like a difficult thing when the team is not following that lead. When I'm like, yeah, they're saying the exact words they should be saying.
Or they don't see it. I mean, there are times when people have been
Yes.
like, wow, that was amazing. And I was like, I read her lips 100%. It was all
I could have
there.
handed you the microphone, right?
Yes.
And they were like, I didn't see that. Like I was looking at her lips too. I didn't,
Ah.
I'm a crappy lip reader. I'm like, I guess I'm not.
Oh, I'm taking every cue. Yes, if you hand me the words, it's true. Some people are like, you did great. We're like, well, I literally just added noise. That's what I always say. I just added noise to the situation. So is the job wrapped up? Is there anything else during the job? So the deaf person says, thank you. The job is finished. Now what? How do
Well,
we
right
wrap that
away, I
up?
want to say that there's something about being, and it's really hard because, so you know how funny that false starts left and right. People say it's the work, it's not about you. Actually, I was a subject in somebody's dissertation where they like interviewed all these interpreters, and I said, I think that's crap. I don't think that's
Uh-huh.
true. It's coming through my hands. It's coming out of my mouth. It's 100% about me, right?
Embodied. Yeah, it's embodied work.
Yeah, embodied work. I
Yep.
love that. But there is a point where you're like, okay, the ego part has got to go away. So when I finish a job, I really want to be like, this person is the person who gets the accolades, not this person. This person is the person who gets the questions, not this person. And that can be a delicate dance, because
Yeah.
people come up and a question, like it's easy. I have a question about the content. Great. I would be happy to interpret that question. I am not a biochemist or whatever. But
Mhm.
if they're like, can I ask you a question about, the work and how did you know what to do? And really, like, I kind of just want to run away. When I'm done interpreting, I want to leave the room.
Yes. Unless it's students there to do observation, I don't know that I think me and my team do run. I often do sneak away as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Or I go to where the presenter is if it
Yes.
allows for that, and I stay in real close.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
I just stay in the mode, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 Yep. And sometimes I think in a conference setting, I don't get to debrief with the presenter other than a thumbs up, a wave, and we go to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, And there's really not much else we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
It's
wrap up
always
with our
fun to
team.
debrief with the team if that
Yes,
is an
if we
option,
can.
but also in conference settings, oftentimes that's like 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next
Get
thing.
coffee. Yeah.
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 I
I
go back and
remember.
pick up my inner child from my
Well, there you
grandma.
go.
Do
There you
you?
go.
I do. I literally do. I find a spot and I sit and I go back and get him and I'm like, okay, you can be in here now.
Nice.
Then do you immediately start criticizing yourself?
Well,
Yes.
probably, yes.
I'm thinking elf on a shelf, like just stay,
Right?
stay
And
off camera, so to speak. Yeah.
with all of this, to put this all back into a nice, pretty box, the book I always have handy and I like to always look at is the Deaf Eyes on Interpreting book. And there's a part in it about deaf academics. And that's a different layer and a different shift in terms of interpreting. And just few things that I pulled out of there was trust and allyship. And a lot of what we're talking about is conference stuff, which we don't have a relationship with these people, but many situations, I'd say 10%, 20%, we do have a relationships with these people's in these spaces and in their meetings and in their presentations, and trust and allyship, huge. Um, what does it even look like in your opinion?
I mean, I can use a very recent example. I've got something coming up where somebody is presenting their doctoral work at a conference, and they text me, "Hey, do you want to get together to?" I mean, this way to talk it through. And I said, "Sure." And they sent me their slides, and and we got on there. We didn't talk about the work at all.
Mm.
We talked about the state of the world, and we talked about how the state of the world is affecting their doctoral work, because it is being affected, and or the state of the country. And we talked about the thing. Like, I was like, who's going to be there? What do you want to leave people with? What are you asking them for? Like, what are you hoping to get out of it? Like, we talked about what the experience will be like, or what they're thinking it will be like, but we didn't ever open up the PowerPoint and go through it together, because I know their work and they know I know their work. And so that's the trust right there. Like, neither of us are worried about what that's going to look like, but it was like, okay, what's the thing of the thing?
Because all of that was information. All of that was much needed
Yeah.
knowledge before you went in.
Yeah. And that's my prep, which is like, if anybody sitting there watching that conversation would be like, well, you didn't even look at the PowerPoint, how's that prep?
Yeah. I was talking to a team recently, just talking about trust
Yeah.
specifically. Since so much work has gone virtual and so much of this work has gone virtual, like
Yep.
professional level work. Um, After a job, they were complaining that the deaf presenter or presenters in this case were really keeping an eye on the captions because they're right here and you
Yep.
can see them. You can almost do it without somebody noticing that you're doing it, but they were really doing it. And they were like, "Oh, I can't believe that was happening." And I was like, "Thank goodness."
Right. I
In
think that's a
some
good thing.
sense, right? Like we are literally being their voice
Yeah.
in a context that we have no stake in,
Yeah.
right? That like the fact that they're trusting us to put their thoughts into this context that is their entire world. My goodness, the trust. And that gives them a chance to change it, to
Yeah.
fix it, to say, no, this, not that, right?
Yeah.
It was an interesting conversation just to help me remember,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much trust in this
But
relationship.
but let's talk about what that trust looks like. So I have worked with deaf folks who have used the captioning as a, let me just check that you're still with me. You're still with me. Oh, let me fix that part,
Yeah,
And I've worked with deaf people who've been like, that isn't what I said.
yeah,
That it's a
yeah,
different feel for
for
that.
sure,
Agreed.
for sure.
You know,
Yeah,
Well, and I thought of trust some if you ask an interpreter, like, what would it look like if a deaf person trusted you with that? The response may be, they don't look at me, they look away. But I have trusted colleagues, deaf people, who stare at me the whole time. And I don't feel like that's a measurement of trust. Watching my captions, it's the way that that interaction happens.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean, I've
feel
had
like if
deaf folks
you're
go like,
sharing, no, I feel like if a deaf person's sharing humor, you trust me to get that humor across. Like you are sharing your personality. Yeah.
yes. No, I was gonna say that sometimes the captioning is like, oh yeah, good word choice. Then they can keep
Right.
trusting.
Sometimes it's a positive thing.
Right. Like, I
Yeah.
think part of the trust goes into, if a deaf person says, I trust that you understand my message well enough to tell it to hearing people in a way they need to hear it. Maybe it isn't the words that come into my head, but like, I trust that you know the words that they need to hear. And then it does look very different. It's like, that is what I said, and that's cool. Like, that, I think that's going to work for this hearing audience, and I appreciate you for doing it, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Another part of that trust and allyship, like accountability and transparency of, I trust you're going to interrupt me, hearing interpreter, if you're not catching something, or that you'll hand the mic off if you're off today, or being transparent of, I don't know, I'm really unsure. I'm really bad at explaining graphs. So when you get to that part, I don't know, just having that, being transparent, having a conversation about it even, um, would be great.
I mean, I do think it's really hard for deaf folks in the sense of, you know, I'm up here presenting about something that I know a lot about, and I have to go through this medium of this person who maybe knows nothing about my field. And if I want it to go really, really smoothly, beautifully, I have to commit to training you, right? I have to sit down with you for like an hour, maybe for 3 weeks, an hour every day, you know, right? And get you
Yeah.
up to my speed. And then it's like smooth as butter. But that was a lot of time. Or, you know, I'm going to send you, and here's some videos of me. And like,
It's a lot
it's
of
an
Or
work.
I'm gonna
unfortunate
gamble.
reality.
Right.
But then I think about, okay, what about when world leaders meet and they have interpreters? Like, I think they actually mostly have like designated or curated pool interpreters. Like, so it's like somebody really like, I know what this world leader sounds like because I'm with her every day and I know her voice. Um, I mean, we only have that if we do that like designated interpreter thing.
Which
Yeah.
often we are in those spaces when we go and do those things.
Yeah.
But it always makes me think, and I've said this multiple times, the interpreting field is at an associate degree level, bachelor's degree level, some masters, very few PhD, and deaf people are skyrocketing past us as we run behind them and hope we can interpret for their extremely complicated shit. And it's not fair. And I feel like that is happening more and more, and we are just still trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know the solution, but it is noticeable.
That's true.
Yeah.
Few other things, but yeah, like you said, content knowledge, specialized terms, and knowing what you don't know.
Yeah. And I think around in these contexts, because there's a lot of dynamics at play, a lot of hearing folks in the room who might know sign language, lots of colleagues, lots of potential judgment and anxiety. I do it like really intentionally recognize that it's just like you said, it's an art and not a science. There are times when it goes awry, and I have to say, I put everything I could into it. I know I did my very best, and it went awry today,
Perfect. Right.
Yeah.
right? And I'll
Mhm.
maybe acknowledge that with the deaf person and repair what I can, and then recognize that we're humans, all humaning, doing
Yes.
the very,
Hard.
very best. Yeah,
Yes.
we can.
Yes.
Are there any last tidbits you want to share with folks about all of this?
Well, it's something that you both sort of referenced is like, I just think it's important to take jobs. It not necessarily has to be like fields you know intimately, because whatever, but yeah, like, I'm not going to do a astrophysicist blah 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 lecture because I can't. But I used to apply to work RID conferences, you know, when it was a different model, and I worked several of them in a row, and it was like my favorite thing to do. And people be like, aren't you so nervous? Because, you know, everybody can hear you, everybody knows what you're saying, I mean, everybody can see. And I was like, I understand interpreting. This is what we're
Yes.
talking about. You know what I
Right?
mean?
Yes.
Like, there's kind of
This is
no,
my
no,
field. Yeah,
Yes.
right.
exactly, exactly. So for me, that was the most fun, you know, talking to interpreters about, or interpreting for interpreters
Sure.
about interpreting. Like,
Yeah.
what could be
Easy.
not, you know, easier, but like, in a way. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's a big piece about, you know, you're saying content and terms and stuff. It's like, you know, way back when you first get that request, do I even understand the title of this paper?
Yep.
Because if I don't,
And even if you understand that deaf person and they give you every word, it's not going to sound.
yeah.
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 Because I've
And I've
done
had
those.
deaf folks say, just say what you see. And I was like, I kind of can't work that way. Like, I just need to I don't need to understand what you understand, but I need to have
Because I don't even know where's the period go? Are we,
Right.
ugh, like, where does my intonation happen? Because I don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any last tidbit, Kirk? You don't have to have one.
I think I've said all my tidbits.
Yeah.
All the tidbits are out. Um, I like to highlight at the end of each episode a deaf-owned business or organization or whatever you all enjoy. So, who do you both want or each want to highlight?
Well, so I'm going to say three.
Yes.
Because one is an organization called Dawn, and they work in the DC area as advocates for people who are in going through tough stuff.
Mhm.
And then two more, like, let's say on the lighter side, fun stuff. There's a brewery here that's owned by deaf folks called Streetcar 82. And folks go there. They have a Signing Santa event every year, and that's fun. And then there's a deaf owned kind of glamping company called Lost River, and they're a little bit out. I don't know if it's technically West Virginia or Virginia. I'm not sure where it is over the line, but they have lots of fun activities and totally deaf owned business.
Awesome. Streetcar, this is their second, Streetcar 82 is their second shout out. Someone else shouted that out. So I love it. So even
Wow.
more so. Who do
Fun.
you have, Kirk?
And what immediately came to mind was Dove.
Yeah.
Dove is Deaf Overcoming Violence Through Empowerment. They're
Yep.
based here in Colorado. They work only in Colorado. But I've just been loving their work and
Yes.
being a part of it as much as I can
Hmm.
for decades, and I just think the world of them.
Yes.
So, Deaf Overcoming Violence Through Empowerment, Dove.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for your time, your wisdom. We could go on, and I hope to work with you both soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You.
Thanks.
Thank you.